Hello and welcome to the Compassion Flower Report. I'm Degé Coutee, president of Patient Advocacy Network at cannabisSavesLives.org and other social media that you can see here. So I thank you for watching today. I've done the Compassion Flower Report for a long time. This is our inaugural episode here on this platform. The way we're doing it now, I'll tell you a little bit more about the brief history of the Compassion Flower Report and what you can come to expect from this show in the future. Please share it with your social networks. I appreciate it. We're going to be talking about medical cannabis policy and other interesting topics. Um, Tonight, what I want to do in this inaugural episode is give you some of the background and history about the Patient Advocacy Network and a little bit about myself. So as we move forward with this show and this program, uh, people want to learn about more about PAN and more about myself, that you'll be able to look at this episode for that background and history. So that's my purpose with this episode. And I did actually try to stream live earlier, and there were buffering issues. So instead of fighting with it, I am going to pre-record this show, and I'm going to make sure I put it up by or before Friday at 4:20. So if that's what that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to commit to at least doing a once a week show. Maybe I'll include other shows, but I will make sure that by Friday at 4:20 here Pacific time, I will upload the next edition of the Compassion Flower Report. So a little bit about this program. It got started while I was working with my friend and colleague Terry Joyce. She had a show called the Hollywood Hemptress Hour, and I started doing a segment while I was co-hosting with her called the Compassion Flower Report. And it was to provide news and information about what was going on with medical cannabis, whether it was local to where we are here in Hollywood, or around the rest of the state of California, or other states, or going around the world. I was providing education and information to people on the radio for that show. Um, then when that show ended and Terry went on to do some other things, I tried to pre-record a couple shows, and it was more in the pre-record it and then edit it and add some other elements and upload it later. And I really didn't like that format. I really like the live feel. So even though I'm pre-recording these and then uploading them later, I'm not going to edit them. I'm going to record them just like a live show. And I'm really looking forward to taking calls and doing some interviews with people. So I look forward to hearing from you. If you are a medical cannabis patient, you have something you want to say, you are a patient advocate out there anywhere in the country working on this issue, I want to hear what you have to say. If you are a medical cannabis provider, meaning that you run a storefront, or you're a cultivator, or you make any of the other medicines out of cannabis, and you have a story you want to tell, I want to hear your voice, and I want to put your voice out there. Cannabis patient voice is really important to us here at the Patient Advocacy Network. Storytelling is very important, and I'll get into that a little bit more as well. So yeah, until I get the buffering issues, I'm sure it has something to do with my internet connection. But until I get that buffering issue taken care of, I will pre-record these and upload them. This is our inaugural issue. It's not going up on Friday at 4:20. I just wanted to put this up and give you all some background about Pan and myself. I've gotten a lot of recent inquiries about who we are and what we do, because we've been doing a lot of outreach, and I've been outreaching to new people. Just because we've been around for a long time, we've been around since 2006. However, our advocates, our team, has been around a lot longer than that. We just incorporated and then became eventually a 501c3 and started that process in 2006. And so while we've been around and we've done some incredible work in this movement, I don't expect that everybody knows who we are or what we do and why it's really important. And that's the other thing we'll talk about. We're going to talk real briefly about where we are right now in the state of medical cannabis in the United States and where we need to go from here. So, again, this is the Compassion Flower Report. I appreciate you watching. My name is Degé Coutee. I'm the president of Patient Advocacy Network at CannabisSavesLives.org, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I appreciate you watching this show. Little history and background about PAN. Like I said, we were founded in 2006 by a group of patient advocates, and we all had a history and background in some area of social services or another, in education, in healthcare, in social services, uh, in a wide range of social service, whether that's working with homeless, whether that's harm reduction, veterans affairs, transgender issues, cancer patients, AIDS patients, and then we had people on board who had campaign experience, who really knew how to do campaign strategy and run a winning campaign, whether a campaign is a nonprofit education campaign or a political campaign. The same steps and the same strategy goes into that. And that's who our founders of the Patient Advocacy Network are. All people who come from the nonprofit sector, who are all in the trenches, hands-on, direct services kind of people. And so we got started, and like I said, we'd already met each other, we already knew each other, we were already working together, we had already developed the name Patient Advocacy Network, and then we were just determining whether or not it was time to, become a nonprofit, if there was enough energy and effort and funding to make that happen, and we did. So a little bit about how it all came to be during that really critical time. I mean, this group of people came together to protect patients' rights at the most critical time in our movement in California. Um, this was right around the time when patient Angel Rach, and if you don't know her, look her up. I love her so very much. I hope that she will come on the program sometime, just by phone call for a few minutes. She had an extended court case that started here in California and went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was quite the process. And while this case was going through, basically it was arguing that the federal government had um, no authority to come into a state with medical marijuana laws, because as long as the patients and the people involved were not violating interstate commerce, that the feds didn't have any jurisdiction. So California was sitting waiting for this ruling or this opinion, knowing that if it did not turn out favorable, that it was highly likely that the feds were going to come in and start raiding dispensaries and or gardens. So that was what was hanging over our heads at the time. And PAN developed workshops and training. We're an educational 501c3. So we can provide advocacy, we can provide social services. Our designation with the IRS is as an educational 501c3. And it's amazing what results you can get when you educate people. And so we developed training and education around the smash and grab raids. The other thing that dispensary operators wanted and needed was compliance training. We had no local regulations at the time. We had no statewide regulations at the time. We had one phrase in SB 420 that recognized cooperative and collective cultivation projects. And that sparked a new flux of people opening dispensaries. And then we had the Attorney General guidelines, which again were not statewide regulations, but again, it empowered people to be like, I can do this on the state level. It was this crazy time when people are wanting to get involved in the industry and do this, or they had been doing it in some way and want to do it legally, but still we had the ongoing federal threat. Um, so we were teaching dispensary operators or potential operators, not just dispensary operators, people wanting to cultivate, bake cookies, make tinctures, um, make cuttings, all of that, and teaching them best practices. Basically, there weren't um, there weren't rules to comply with at the time, so it was just how to be as in compliance as you can, pending regulations on the local level, and people knew that there was already that knowing that at some point there were going to be statewide regulations, and you might as well get used to this idea of compliance and taxation and labeling and childproof packages and these kinds of things. Um, and we got people prepared for that. The other thing that we taught people is we taught a 3-hour training on how to protect your rights during a law enforcement encounter, whether that's on the street, in your car, at home, all the places where you and I, as normal people, have already had law enforcement encounters. And then the second half of that training was all about how to handle a DEA raid, how to prepare, how to handle it when it happens. People under fear and duress can make some huge mistakes when it comes to protecting their Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. And we wanted to make sure that people understood what to expect. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest joys as a teacher, um, I come from a background in teaching as well. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about my background. But as somebody who really enjoys teaching and facilitating lessons and coursework and workshops, one is to have people's absolute undivided attention during this workshop. Have people ask great questions during the question and answer session at this workshop, which lets you know they're engaged. And then the best part is having them call you after they get home from being pulled over and they didn't go to jail. Sometimes they didn't walk away from the encounter with their medical marijuana. Sometimes the pot and the pipe got stomped out on the side of the road, but they didn't go to jail. And they didn't have to deal with going to court. And, and getting calls from people who are at DEA raids, waiting for those calls from those people when they finally get out of there, because the DEA just makes this process go on forever. And have those people call me, be like, it was just like you said it was going to be, and I did just what you said to do, and I'm at home. And yeah, they looked at my ID and they took some information down, but I didn't get arrested, I didn't get hurt, and I'm at home with my family, and I handled it just the way you said to handle it. And anytime you have a law enforcement encounter, especially during that time where the DEA's attitude was that medical marijuana is fake, everyone's just involved in drug dealing, this is a Schedule I narcotic, and they came to bust some heads. And when people could call me and say, what you told me worked, and I got to spend the night in my own bed, is just a huge, it really feels good to know that the Patient Advocacy Network, through these workshops, have really helped people in a really real world way. I mean, the other workshops, yeah, you can see the benefits of the other workshops that we offer, but the law enforcement encounter, especially that raid preparedness training, was absolutely huge. So we're providing that for dispensary operators. And the other thing that's going on, in addition to the DEA smash and grab raids, is, like I said, because of SB 420 and because of the Attorney General guidelines, you've got dispensaries opening up all over the state. Up to this point, medical marijuana was very much a Bay Area phenomenon. And now you've got all these dispensaries opening all over the state of California. Politicians are wanting to know what's going on. Angry neighbors are wanting to know what's going on. And so county board of supervisors and city councils are now starting to have meetings where this is being discussed. Or even if it's not on the agenda, you start finding out that angry neighbors are signing up to speak for general public comment and are starting to put the bug in the ear that you need to get rid of these establishments. So at the time, the bravest people in this part of the movement were the dispensary operators. They were showing up at these meetings to plead their case. Like, please don't shut us down. We're here. We're good neighbors. Um, we're treating patients. They're members. We're verifying their recommendations. Please don't shut us down. Now, you would think that that would be a good voice, that that's a good advocate. However, there was a significant portion of elected officials and those angry neighbors who just thought that the dispensary operators were self-serving, that they just wanted to protect their business interests, their economic interests, and that was why they were the ones down there speaking, because it was about them. And that's when I realized that on the local level, having the dispensary operators be the voice was not going to work. So one of the things our network did very early on, before getting our educational 501c3 status, is developing all these other workshops to teach patients how to engage democracy, to teach patients how to tell their stories, to teach them how to overcome the fear and the stigma. I mean, it's huge. Here you are, somebody who's relatively quiet. You're not going out of your way to tell people that you're a medical marijuana patient. One, there's the stigma of being ill. One, there's the stigma of using cannabis. Then there's the legality of it. By coming out and saying, hey, I'm a medical cannabis patient back in 2005, 2006, you're telling the world that I regularly possess, use, and purchase a Schedule I narcotic. That's just how I roll. So, you've got these smash and grab raids going on, and you've got people who want to be brave and need to be empowered. And we did that through education. We taught a series of workshops, not to overwhelm people and let people kind of digest things bit at a time, to teach them how to overcome that fear and stigma, to teach them how to find their voice, to teach them how to express their story, then to teach them how the process works, how regulations work, how you get in there and find your elected officials, how you write them an effective letter, how you put together your 2-minute public comment for meetings. And it was big. I mean, you're talking about, that's why I said when the dispensary operators were really brave at the time to go into a council chamber or a county chamber. You're probably going to check in at some type of desk and show ID to get into the building. You may even go through a security screening or some type of scanner. You're then going to show up in that chamber, and you're going to sign up to talk. And now it's a kiosk, but before it was you physically filled out a speaker card. And then when you were called upon, you got up and spoke for 1 or 2 minutes. And, that's big for anybody. But it's really big for somebody who's going to talk about medical cannabis, and really big if you're somebody who's really ill. Those patients that showed up in wheelchairs, those patients that were visibly ill, who you could see their illness, you could see their disease. And it was really big for them to get out there. However, what I will say is it was big and it was important at the time, because when I got started doing this here in Southern California, I had come down here from Northern California. And I'll go on a little bit about my before coming to California and then the work I did in Northern California before coming to Southern California to take this issue on head on. Was when I got down here and was organized with my other advocates, as these dispensary operators are going to these meetings, we're going to, and we're in force of just 1 to 3 of us. And I mean, it was powerful because we would get up to the podium and, we said, we're not dispensary operators, we're patient advocates. We have a 501c3 patient advocacy network, and then you almost can kind of tell other patient stories. I'm working with this many AIDS patients, I'm working with this, and I have this scenario, and this mom, and this child, and so you're kind of telling the stories for them. But we didn't know how far we could get that way. So we really pushed to get patients involved and patients telling their stories. And it was huge and it was really important because the first thing I learned coming down to Southern California from Northern California and going to these meetings is that when the council or the supervisors would start speaking amongst themselves, they all admitted that they were looking for and or waiting for the same thing. They wanted to see what the city of LA was going to do. And they would all say, if Los Angeles is going to ban this, then we're going to ban this. And these patients can just go up to the Bay Area and get their medicine up there. And as a patient advocate sitting in the chamber, listening to council members now after public comment is over, for them to say, LA bans, we ban, and all these people can just drive up to the Bay Area, indicated to me that despite hearing from the dispensary operators, and despite hearing from an advocate like myself and others who are in the trenches with patients, that they got to see some patience. They have to understand why you can't just expect somebody to jump in the car and drive 6 to 8 hours to get to the Bay Area, to then go shopping around and figure out where the dispensaries are and become a member. You got to fill out the membership paperwork. And then you have to figure out, what you're going to get. And then you have to get back in the car and drive another 6 to 8 hours to get back down to Southern California. I was incensed. But like I said, we were able to really activate those patients and get them into those chambers and telling their stories. And the other thing that the Patient Advocacy Network did is I realized that as president and kind of trusted with keeping this all going, that I had to make sure LA City Council didn't pass a ban. That was, after about the third or fourth meeting I went to in other cities around Southern California, and I've been to dozens of meetings. I've testified in LA alone 337 times. I've lost count after 337. And that's between the council, between all of the different committees, between the planning commission, all the task force meetings, everything in between. It was between myself and my other local board member, Richard Kearns. We had counted up that just in LA alone, between he and I, we had testified over 337 times on this issue. And again, that's not to mention going to all these other cities, but LA is where we're constituents, so this is where we could have the most impact. And when I heard all these other cities saying, well, we're going to do whatever, that expression that so goes LA, so goes the world, I girl from Chicago hanging out in the Bay Area decided to come down and take on Los Angeles and was really learning the culture down here. And I just found it really fascinating to hear all these other city council members, county board of supervisors, county council, city attorneys, all sitting around saying, well, we don't like that these dispensaries are opening up all around us, and we support Prop 215, and we know patients need their medicine, but, if LA is going to ban it, we're going to ban it, and they can all just drive up to the Bay Area. So I fought really hard to make sure that we didn't have an all-out ban in Los Angeles. And I did that by meeting with one particular city council member. This whole issue of medical cannabis regulation in the city of Los Angeles was placed in the lap of one particular city council member, Councilmember Dennis Zine. I'm happy to give him a shout out. I really love him. I really regretted when he wasn't on the council anymore and he termed out. He'd always been very kind to me and had an open door. And myself and another colleague, we took him to lunch at his favorite restaurant in his district, away from City Hall, and we just had a talk with him. It was just real heart to heart, and I know that my words resonated with him because there was already a ban written and on his desk from the city attorney. The city attorney of Los Angeles wanted a ban. But the city attorney knows that despite they're an elected official in LA, that has to come. That push, that initial push, had to come from the city council. And so since the city council kind of put it on Dennis Zine, everyone was sitting to wait to see what he was going to motion. And after our talk, he motioned that he did not want a ban, that the cat was out of the bag, that prohibition doesn't work, and that Los Angeles was better off figuring out how to regulate it than to try to ban it. And his recommendation was a resolution for the city attorney to draft a moratorium and not a ban. And his words and his decision and the rest of the city council following him made a huge ripple in Southern California. And I know, had myself and our other advocates not been so active, had we not pushed to have these conversations, it was very possible that we could have seen an all-out ban in all of Southern California. It's not perfect in Southern California. We still have bans. We still have problems. We have what we call medical marijuana deserts, where there are these pockets of bans where patients do have to go outside of their area into closer metropolitan areas to access medical cannabis. But what I was hearing when I first got down here in it was 2004, the end of 2004, beginning of 2005, right around in there, that they were considering just banning it and everyone could go to the Bay Area. And I really believe that the Patient Advocacy Network had not been active and really pushing for this, and had I not happened to move to Los Angeles to take on this issue and take Councilmember Zine to lunch, that it's very possible that the only places in Southern California that were not listening to the city of Los Angeles so much were the cities of West Hollywood and Palm Springs. And I participated on their task forces as well, as kind of like an alternate member, that kind of thing. Just enough to provide some input. And those were the only two cities that were like, yeah, we think we want to do this. They saw themselves more as a sister city to San Francisco on this issue than they really recognized themselves as like a SoCal kind of that kind of relationship. So I know that getting those patients involved and active were really, really important. And it helped us cultivate patients that we ended up taking with us on congressional visits. And this was really big and really important because it eventually got congressional hearings open. So we found patients and we were asking, what congressional district are you in? Let's see if we can help you schedule a meeting with your congressional member when they come home from Washington, D.C., specifically just to meet with constituents. Constituent days they're kind of a zoo. There's a line and you kind of get run in and you sit down and you talk, and there's somebody there with a clipboard writing down everything you're saying. There's another person there with a watch timing it all, and you say your thing and you do your thing and you have your opportunity and then you're out, and they're really busy during constituent visits. And I think we got around to about 15 offices. I'm trying to remember a few. Waxman, Behrman, Waters, Pelosi, Woolsey, uh, Schiff, Becerra, uh, Roybacher, Bono. So yeah, there's just a name of the ones that come across my mind in the immediate. And we're there with their constituent. I went and met with my own um, congressional member, and then with all the other patients that we helped them make their appointments. One of us would go with them, mostly just to back them up. We wanted this to be about them. They're the constituent. We want them to tell their story. And we would just kind of back it up with what they're telling you is true, and this is how it expands around your whole district. I remember meeting with Adam Schiff's district, and I remember telling him there are probably more dispensaries in your district than any place in greater LA right now. And that was just knockdown shock. Um, so it was, like I said, this was really informative. You got the patient telling their story and explaining what they're going through. And then you're just backing that patient up with more information, more education. We were there to educate Congress. And then ultimately you have to have an ask. If you're going to engage democracy and change policy, you can't just get up there and tell a story. You have to have a definite ask. And what we were asking these congressional members, because mind you, at this time, we've got landlord threat letters going on, we've got smash and grab raids going on, we've got bank accounts being closed, we've got the IRS going after people for things they didn't know about. Mind you, there was a time that dispensaries had bank accounts and it wasn't a problem. They had payroll and all this other stuff, and it wasn't until federal interference that we had a problem. So, we were asking Congress to please open congressional hearings to question the DEA on these tactics. And you, as somebody representing California, the birthplace of medical marijuana and the Compassionate Use Act, you have a duty and an obligation to your constituents to go back to Washington and make something happen. And they did. And I honestly, the people I have to thank for that are Nancy Pelosi and her district office. We had to apply some serious pressure to her office at a very critical time, and we worked it through. We worked it out. Congressman John Conyers Jr. and his lead counsel, Rachel King, who was a cancer patient, and she passed away, and she didn't tell us. I don't know if she used cannabis, but she was so concerned and compassionate and involved with us getting these congressional hearings open. Congressman Conyers put me with her, and then we started providing her with all kinds of information. Now, mind you, while these smash and grab raids are going on, our advocates are out there with patients taking pictures, taking video footage, giving the DEA hell. DEA, go away. FTF. You know what that means? If you don't know what FTF is, we'll have another conversation about FTF. There was a lot of anger. The DEA was coming in hostile. They're showing up with battering rams, and they're hog tying people and ransacking the dispensary, and not just leaving with all the cash and all the herb. They're walking out with flat screen TVs and electronics, and it was just outrageous and ridiculous. So we're providing this information to Congress. Basically, we made it down that path, and we got those congressional hearings open, and the DEA was questioned. Now, the tactic they were questioned on eventually was not necessarily the smash and grab raids, and not necessarily the banking and IRS issues, mostly because congressional members knew, and the attorneys knew, Rachel King knew, that if you tell the DEA and you question them on the tactic of a raid, the DEA is going to tell you that the way the laws are written, the way the federal laws are written, they have every jurisdiction to conduct a raid. The IRS will tell you, under the IRS code, it is completely within their jurisdiction to go after these dispensaries. Same thing with the banking issue. Again, a federal law. The thing that they got them on, what Congress pushed them on, was the threat letters to the landlords, because a landlord tenant relationship is not controlled federally. It's a state relationship. A contract between a tenant and a landlord is a state contract. Now, while we might not have gotten all the slam dunk we were hoping for, it did curtail a lot of activity. We didn't see raids for quite some time. We stopped seeing the landlord threat letter. There were a handful of dispensaries that were still going through issues with the feds, and we had some wonderful victories in that. Lynette Shaw, she won a victory in that. Stephen D'Angelo, he won a victory in that, and that curtailed that. So, heroes, I mean, people who went through so much stress and anxiety during this time while they were fighting the feds. And I was real happy that we were able to shed some light on that and get those congressional hearings open. Now, shortly after those hearings, I think one of the side effects we saw of that was something called the Cole Memo. And this was James M. Cole, I believe I have that right, James M. Cole, drafted a memo. He's a U.S. Deputy Attorney to the Attorney General of the United States. And in this memo, he is basically instructing states that have medical cannabis regulations that if they do things a certain way, that they could potentially alleviate federal intervention. That first thing being is you have to have statewide regulations. Now, by this point, by the time we have the James Cole memo, other states now are on board as medical marijuana states. We don't have any legalization yet, but we have a few medical marijuana states. So this memo was really directed toward those people. And what James Cole was saying is you have regulations, you can track it seed to sale. There were like 7 points to this letter. And this letter led to the state legislature now getting on board with this issue. So first we had the local outbreak of cities trying to figure out what to do, moratorium, ban, pass regulation. And the thing that here's the other thing. When after we heard all these municipalities say, well, if LA passes a ban, we're passing a ban. And then they decide that, well, LA didn't pass a ban, so we don't feel like we can pass a ban, and so we're going to see what we can do. And they'd all sit there and be like, well, we just wish California would give us some guidance here. The Attorney General guidelines aren't enough, and we really need statewide regulations, and we can use some guidance from the state. And this became a method of dragging their feet on passing any regulation and trying to figure out ways to extend a moratorium, that whole mess. But the state got started. So we had the local level, we had the congressional level, and now we had the local level. And for 4 years, the state legislature really grappled with how to regulate just medical marijuana. And again, a really expensive scheme. And they wanted to treat medical marijuana like nightclubs and bars. And we just weren't having it. So, again, the patients who have been there and went through all the training and really enjoyed telling their story and being an advocate, now we've got these patients either contacting Sacramento. We did take some patients up there to walk the halls and meet their legislators, go door to door. It's very, very impactful to do that. And for 4 years, we kept these really bad laws from being passed. And it's frustrating because you got the James Cole memo that says, well, if you have regulations and this and that, then, we might not mess with you. But then at the same time, we couldn't have sloppy laws that were going to be uber expensive. And really, they wanted the Alcohol Beverage Control Board to oversee the dispensaries. So the police that go into bars is who they wanted to put in charge of medical marijuana. And we weren't having it. So eventually what came down the pike was MRSA. And this was the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. And right after it passed, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, which became known as Prop 64, was out gathering signatures. It does not take much thought, much intelligence to take a look at MRSA and to take a look at Prop 64 and realize they were written in tandem with each other. There was a game plan. That they were intended to complement each other, and that the voter initiative, known as Prop 64, was going to overtake and start to swallow up the medical marijuana rules. And that's what's happened. And getting into, we'll get into that a little bit more, because then we're getting into where we are and where we need to go. But just a real brief history of myself, because I have people ask, and like I said, the real purpose of this inaugural episode is to give you some background on PAN and the great work that we've done, as well as to give you just a little background about myself. I'm the president of the organization. I help execute the programs for the organization, and I'm also responsible for the fundraising for this organization. So as such, I just want to provide a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, near Chicago. For anyone that knows that area, knows that basically anyone that's from the region is basically from Chicago. But I went on to Purdue University, where I started there as a hard science person. I was a math science major when I started at Purdue University. I didn't know, who knows what the hell they want to do when they're 18 years old, right? You go into college, mom says, you're going to Purdue. Okay, I'm going to Purdue. My SAT scores for math are freaking crazy. I don't know what the heck to do. I like math. I like the language of mathematics. But then, while I might have enjoyed it academically, I really started to realize that I don't know that I'd like this as a career. So I started to explore what I wanted to do. I was studying education. I was studying math science on one end, and I was studying becoming a teacher on the other, in case that was how I wanted to use my math science skills as an educator. And then I realized that there's something really important about being a very effective writer. So I switched over to the English department, and then took every major in that department in class that was of a writing nature. So in my English literature curriculum, I chose to take the classes that were really about the rhetoric and composition classes, real critical thinking about how to write and be effective and get that professor criticism and feedback that is like no joke. I also studied professional writing, which it was a very diverse kind of program as well. I focused on business writing classes, which taught me all about business plans and writing resumes and cover letters and that kind of thing. And then I also studied the journalistic aspect of writing. Purdue University did not have a school of journalism, because Indiana University had a school of journalism. So Purdue University tucked its journalism emphasis under its professional writing program. So I learned all about how to write effectively, magazine articles, how to freelance, all of that. I was also working at the student newspaper at the time. So I was actually a news reporter, had my own beat, and then became the copy editor for the paper, which meant I had to get there at 4:30 in the afternoon, finish my own stories. Then I had to read every article written for the paper for the day. I had to edit it and make sure that it was correct and fix it. Then I had to give everything a headline. And then I had to lay that paper out, and I had to send it into print. And again, this is not the era of social media or computers. I mean, we had computers that we could download the stories, but we were literally laying waxy sheets of paper down on light tables and taking pictures of them and sending them down to the print shop in the basement. But I'll tell you, that fast-paced environment of working in a newspaper, and the type of writing that goes with it, and just all the knowledge that comes with being a beat writer and reading everybody's stories. I really learned a lot about the world. Um, the other thing is I was always an impassioned, self-described environmental activist, and my love of nature and all the time I spent camping as a Girl Scout, um, really, I found industrial hemp. And I started asking the environmental group organizations I was working with or around, why aren't we taking this on as an issue? So I was already coming into college wanting to see industrial, no blood for oil. It's like, yeah, no blood for oil. There's all this green stuff we can be growing for oil. What are we doing here? We don't need to be relying on foreign sources for oil. We've got oil here, and we've got the way to produce biofuel. Um, and then all the other wonderful things that hemp can do. Why are we getting our textiles from China? What is going on here? So that was a whole other rabbit hole to go down. And then you start to kind of realize the drug war and how racist it is, and wow, there's this whole thing here going on. Soon after college, I got rear-ended. I got rear-ended bad, and I knew there was something wrong with my neck and my spine, but it seemed like nobody else wanted to talk about it. I was 11 years old when I first started having tension and pain in my neck, and ringing in my ears, and headaches. And by the time I was 16, my extremities were going numb, especially these fingers right here. And then I had these knots under my shoulder blades and knots in my neck, and the headaches were getting worse, and I'm starting to get things kind of like that are migrainey. And then I get rear-ended, and then I get an x-ray. And that started to show that I had a degenerative spinal disease, and I had some things going on in my C-spine, and that they were probably made worse by this accident. Well, as a result of that, I was put on some pretty hard meds. It's just what they did. Doctor gave me pretty much all the samples I wanted. And then that was it. After the samples were gone, and like I said, I had quite a stash of samples. And the samples were gone. I called the doctor. He says, "Oh no, you're done with that." And again, I think it's doctor's ignorance. I think he was helpful. I love this doctor. It's my family doctor. But I don't know that he really was aware that maybe you should prepare a patient when you take them off of a medication like this, or maybe you should lower dose or something. Because I can tell you, going off of it cold turkey was really difficult. The easiest way to describe it is like it felt like my nerves had been folded up like a garden hose, and then all of a sudden let go. And all that pain, all that tension, all that headachiness, all that ringing in the ears just came rushing back. And I think I may have also had maybe a mild physical dependency on it as well. I was not myself. I don't know how else to describe it, and I'm sure anybody else who's gotten off of some heavy narcotic pain pills, I wish I could remember. Oh, it was called Soma compound. Soma compound is, I believe, what they had me on. Yes. So they took me off of that, and I was freaked out. I was like, I hurt so bad. Aspirin isn't doing anything for this. If anything, it's making the ringing in my ears worse. And that's when my roommate said, "You need to smoke a bowl." I won't tell you what I told him he needed to do, but like I said, I wasn't myself, and I wasn't a cannabis user in college. I was I'm not gonna say I was straight edge in high school, but I did a little underage drinking. I saw cannabis use around me. I grew up in Northwest Indiana. We weren't the kids that had lots of drug money. I mean, we were pretty happy to grab a 40 ounce before a football game, and if somebody had, a swaggy joint, most people were pretty happy with that. That was fine. Like I said, I'm not a prohibitionist. I just, it wasn't something I wanted to do or try at the time. Had minimal exposure to cannabis in college. Smoked it twice, maybe once or no. I'm gonna say I smoked it 3 times. I smoked it once right before I went to college, and I smoked it a couple times while I was in college. And granted, I could appreciate the more psychedelic factor of it, and where it kind of put me in a headspace with the thinking, um, but it wasn't something where I really could recognize the physical effects of it like I did this night, where I took 2 hits, and in 5 minutes, the pain was greatly decreased and my mood was a lot calmer. And then 15 minutes into it, that headachiness was gone, the ear ringing had decreased significantly, it wasn't gone, and the pain had diminished significantly, although it wasn't gone, but it was just like the knob. I mean, we went from the hose to then like the knob just slowly turning it down. And that was the point for me where I said, I've got to learn everything I can about this plant. I understand the hemp side of it, and I've been talking about the hemp side of cannabis now for probably 5 or 6 years. And now it's time to investigate medical cannabis. And I figured there had to be other people out there like me, who were using cannabis therapeutically for one reason or another. Not maybe just for pain, or not just because of getting off of hard pain pills, but I'm sure there are people using it out there for a lot of different reasons. And so I started producing literature, just little pieces, little 1-page flyer, maybe front and back, stickers, getting a message out, a meme on a sticker, um, eventually creating a zine, talking more about protecting legal rights and being careful out there, because the Indiana Chicago area, not not a friendly place for getting caught with having cannabis on you. I mean, just the scent of it near you is enough to, you know, the police just ripping and tearing at you at that point to find it. Um, so I started doing this. At the same time, I'm teaching preschool, and I'm writing newsletters for the Sierra Club, and I'm working for the Hoosier Environmental Council, and other. I'm a mentor at the university for undergraduates, and all this other stuff. Um, then entered into the realm of doing social work and homelessness prevention, where I became the education director for the Homelessness Prevention Network, and just really embedded in social services in Lafayette, Indiana at this time. Then I get approached by a friend who's like, hey, come to a meeting with me. I've been telling them about you. In addition to handing out the literature stuff, I was also writing letters to state assembly people in Indiana, and congressional members. I shared these letters with my friend. He goes, oh, can I get a copy of these? And I was like, of course, take them, learn from them, mimic them, write your letter too. And next thing I know, my friend's like, I want you to come to a meeting. The people at Indiana Normal really want to meet you. The chair of Indiana Normal, big shout out to Steve Dillon, love you to pieces, Steve. Not only was he the chair of Indiana Normal, he happened to be the president of the board of directors of National Normal. So he was jet setting back and forth between Indianapolis and Washington D.C. And I remember watching Steve give a talk. I don't know if it was a workshop. It was kind of a workshop. It was more of a talk. He's a lawyer. Um, his form of a legal training, I mentioned earlier, we were doing these legal trainings, and I teach these workshops. Well, that all stemmed because of Steve Dillon. And it started because he would give these talks, and he would even answer his phone like this sometimes. His signature was, how did the cops convince you to give up your rights? How did you arrest yourself? And that was what got me on the learning about law enforcement encounters, and taking that knowledge from Steve and eventually building on it, which became the training that I provide now to people in the medical cannabis space. So that all started there. And while I was educated, they got me on board. They not only did they put me on the board of they put me on the board of directors one meeting, and then the following meeting, they made me their education director. And I put on the first conference in the United States on medical cannabis on September 8th, 2001. 3 days before 9/11. And one of our speakers was Angel Rach, who you heard me mention earlier as having the U.S. Supreme Court case that when it went wrong, we had the DEA smash and grab raids. She had just filed her case with the U.S. Supreme Court when she came to speak at this conference. She provided me with a huge packet of information. And as the conference coordinator, of course, I asked everyone who was going to speak, present me some materials, let me know what you want me to include in your bio, let me know if there's anything in the packet you send me that you want photocopied to be put in the conference packet. Angel Rach sends me a box, okay? She sends me a box in the mail of information that there was no way I was going to get through all of it prior to the conference. But I did go through all of it, and it was a fascinating history of cultivating and dispensing for medical cannabis under 215 since 1996 and a little bit before, because of course it wasn't like Prop 215 happened and then there was the compassionate use. There was compassionate use and then there was Proposition 215. And so this history was lovely that she presented me, and I read all of it. Turns out a year after I conducted that conference, I ended up moving to Northern California. And while I was doing social services and social work there, I wasn't, again, I wasn't in the medical marijuana realm when I came out here to California. I was doing it in Indiana, but I came out here, and Steve Dillon was kind enough to call everyone and said, look, you took her from us, you got her, you might as well use her. So I attended some California normal meetings. I was immediately offered the position as social services director for Berkeley Patients Group, which was fascinating. I got to take all this background I had in education and social services and apply it to medical cannabis patients. I was also then hired by Americans for Safe Access to do their programs that they had. They had a peer counseling program, which was another type of education program. It was out in the field. So I did that. And then I worked on some other campaigns. It was absolutely fascinating. I worked on Measure Z with Richard Lee and the Oakland Civil Liberties Alliance. They put a measure before the voters that basically was fascinating. It was when California state law allows, the city of Oakland shall. And that allows was whenever marijuana became legal for adult use in the state of California, that the city of Oakland would already have regulations in place and how they were going to manage and tax adult recreational use in the city of Oakland. So I was, again, it was another education job. I was teaching people how to gather signatures, how to manage a petition, how to register voters, how to ask those qualifying questions to make sure that somebody is giving you the signature that you need. And then soon after that, I was hired by the Alliance of Berkeley Patients to work on their initiative from signature gathering all the way through the election night and beyond. And this is a fascinating little tidbit from working on what was known as Measure R. So we got our signatures, and now we're running our campaign, and we're doing polling. We're polling voters as we're calling them. We're doing phone banking and polling kind of in tandem. And all of our numbers are telling us that somewhere between 62 and 64% of the voters are going to vote yes on this. And it was, if you voted on this today, where would you stand? And we were polling at about 62 to 64%. Election night comes and we lose by just fraction of a percent. Like, it was that close to 50%. And I didn't believe it. And my colleague and president of the Alliance of Berkeley Patients and one of the primary funders of this campaign, Debbie Goldsberry, didn't believe it. And we're at our election night event. We're sitting at the bar. And she looks at me and she says, I don't believe it. She says, Degé, we're going to do a recount. We're going to count these ballots. So I went from thinking my job was over that night with the election to now measure R going into a recount campaign where I lived in the basement of the Alameda County Courthouse for 6 weeks, watching them pop all these boxes of vote by mail ballots and provisional ballots and recount them. Then we got to the die bolt machines, and we were like, well, we need the data, we need a recount from those machines. And that's when we were informed that that wasn't possible, that we would only get the data that it produced the night before. There was no way to double check it and go in there and analyze each individual ballot cast on that machine, which landed us in a lawsuit with the county of Alameda alongside the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It was found that the machines were not legal in their in that capacity. Measure R went back on the ballot as Measure JJ, and I think it won by 63%. The whole thing was a win-win-win. It showed that our campaign strategy worked. It showed us that our intuition was correct. It showed us that the recount was the right thing to do. It showed everybody there in Alameda County what these die bolt machines were about, and so we changed a lot of things. By the time I was informed that the die bolt machines could not give us a recount, and I knew that we were getting ready to go into the lawsuit, that was when I picked up from the Bay Area and moved down to Los Angeles. So that's just a little history. I had some other jobs when I was there in the Bay Area as well. I was so busy for the 2 years that I was there, like 2.5 years that I was in the Bay Area. I just killed it. I just absolutely killed it. And then SB 420 passed, and I started seeing this huge influx of people, not just from the Bay Area. I had people coming up to my office from Southern California. And what I was hearing, I'm sure we'll talk about it another time, but what I was hearing was telling me that Southern California was getting ready to explode, and that there was no shortage of good activists in the Bay Area, and that they probably would miss me. But if I didn't get my butt down to Southern California, the movement could be in trouble. And my intuition could not have been more right. I mean, the smash and grab raids began in San Diego right after the Raich decision. Every municipality except for West Hollywood and Palm Springs had drafted and was ready to put forward a full ban on any and all medical cannabis commercial activity if LA did the same. And I got down here and we really did some great work. So where are we now? All around the country, we've got regulations in various states. And I'm not hearing from patients that they're happy about this. I'm not going to go into specific states and what's going on. And we'll do that for future shows where we really focus on one set of rules. But for example, we have states where you can't grow your own. We have states where they don't allow you to sell raw flowers or smokable varieties. We've got states where doctors' hands are tied. We've got states where the patient list is not extensive enough, and so there are people who are not able to get access to medical cannabis. We've got the situation like we do here in California, where the taxes are so darn high that the patients I spoke to report to me they're no longer using the dispensaries. So while we have made some significant progress, there is a lot more that needs to be done. And I want you to know the Patient Advocacy Network is here to help patients, advocates, providers, you, to make it happen. Because that's what we're here for. That's what our heart and soul is in this movement. It's not about medical cannabis fitting the regulations. It's about patients first and the regulations being appropriate for the patients. We have a huge problem in California with a compassionate care bill that really got gutted, and we've had some wonderful programs here in the past where operators, and I'm going to call out Valerie Corral. She's a hero of mine. WHAM was the name of her organization, the Women's Men's Alliance for Medical Marijuana. They're basically hospice, giving away cannabis, giving away food. That was what the Compassionate Use Act was founded on, is very sick people getting cannabis for free and other social services and support like counseling, like food, like friendship, like entertainment and activities to help people who are going through a really tough time. When I was in Berkeley Patients Group, and we'd have those patients who'd come to us not too long after chemo, not too long after dialysis, I would think most anybody else would want to be at home. These people wanted to be with us. They wanted to come sit in our social center. They wanted to smoke a joint and hang out. We'd make them coffee, provide fruit, juice, whatever, hang out with them, and then they would go home. And these people lived longer, livable lives, not just because of the marijuana, but because of having social community. And it's really big. It's part of the health and wellness of this plant, and it's what we really want to make sure that we exemplify and get out there. So while we do have medical cannabis laws and we're seeing legalization, and I'm all for people getting out of jail and getting their records expunged, and that is happening under legalization, I'm real happy about it. In the meantime, patients' rights can't get stomped out. We can't be killing compassion because a bunch of lawmakers want to figure out a way to make a bunch of money off of adult recreational use. So I'm hoping that you will stand with me as we move forward to make better laws and keep the patient voice in policy. Which brings me to, of course, my other duty and obligation as president of the Patient Advocacy Network. You're not going to see a Patreon account here or a link to Patreon. You're going to find a donate button at our blog at a Cannabis Patient Voice, panorg.blogspot.com. We do have a donate button at Cannabis Saves Lives. Our website isn't being rebuilt, and possibly in a matter of days, maybe even hours, the donate button on the regular website will be working. But right now, we've been sending everybody over to the blog to make a donation, and we know times are hard. Believe me, if we were fully funded right now, I might not even be making this video. I would just be out there doing the activism that needs to be done. But you need to know about PAN. You need to know about what it is we do and what we can do. We've got the most experienced, most skilled advocates available to anyone out there struggling with this. We know there are other really good advocates out there that we want to network with you. I may have mentioned, maybe I didn't in this video yet, that in addition to all the work we've done here in California, I've conducted workshops in other states. I've gotten phone calls from patients in Washington, in Minnesota, in Illinois, Florida, New York, Maine. I've gotten calls from other places. I've gotten calls from Texas that doesn't have it yet. I had somebody help me work on a project in Guam. We have made ourselves available. We want to continue to make ourselves available. We want to be here to educate and advocate and empower everyone and keep that patient voice in policy. The only way we're going to be able to do it, the only way we're going to get the best laws that we can, lower these taxes in California and make sure these laws make sense and not put these mom and pop dispensaries out of business, is we need your support. Anyone who knows me, and hopefully I'll get some testimony and referrals for some of you people. But like I said, having done that workshop on protecting patients' rights and having patients come back to us and say, I did what you said during the raid preparedness training, and it really helped. And I got to sleep in my own bed. And, I didn't get my car searched or things of that nature. we love being effective. As a teacher, as someone with a background in education, it's wonderful to see your students flourish and have them come back to you and let you know that the lessons that you provided is why it all happened. Knowing that we killed some bad bills because patients went to their legislators and explained why it was a bad bill and why they could go back to the drawing board and do it better. There's no need to pass a bad bill. You can make it better. Same thing. Anybody else who's had to deal with these voter initiatives and where they come from and who funds them, that's for another time. But we've got them, and we have to start reforming them, or we're going to see the end of compassion. And so PAN needs your support. We're an educational 501c3. We're not a retail outlet. We don't have income sources coming into a nonprofit. We only do what we do because there are people like you who make a donation. So if you go to our blog, click on our donate button. That's why I have that little donate icon on our on this screen here. Just to remind you, you're not going to find a Patreon account. You're going to get to make a donation to a 501c3, and you're going to get a tax-deductible receipt for that donation. If you can only make a one-time donation today of $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, it's great. I appreciate it. What we need and what really helps us with our strategy and our outreach and our education and our organizing is if you can make a monthly donation. Even if that's a $5 donation a month, that's $60 a year. If you're someone that says, I can afford $60 a year for this, then yes, please become a sponsor at $5 a month. If you're someone that can do more, if you can do $10, $15, $20, $25 a month, if you are blessed and have more means and you can do $100, $250 a month. I do have a couple sponsors that are doing $250. I have someone who's doing $100. I've had some people recently sign up to do $25 a month. This is what we need. If we have anywhere between, depending upon the quantity, of that individual monthly donation, we need just somewhere, I'm going to say roughly, let's call it 420. Let's call it 420. We need 420 people to choose that monthly amount and stick to it. And what we're going to do is the first 420 people or businesses, business operators, who sign up to make a monthly donation in any amount of $5 or more, you're going to get a gift from the Patient Advocacy Network. We're going to mail you a gift as our way of saying thank you for being a monthly sponsor. So after you've been a monthly sponsor for 90 days, we will start to pull those people's information and mail you your gift. And we'll do that for 420 people, because if 420 people can get involved and make even just a small monthly donation, I can't tell you how huge that is to the Patient Advocacy Network. If you recall, when I first introduced the background of our founding team, teachers, healthcare providers, social service providers, people working with veterans, people working with harm reduction community, people working with the homeless, people working with AIDS patients, cancer patients. We're a group of people that don't come from a corporate background. We all come from a non-profit background. If I could fund this organization myself, I would. I can't. I need you. I can't do this work. I can't continue to guarantee that patients are going to have a voice in public policy if you don't help us. So, check out our blog. It's pretty cool anyway. It's informative. Make a donation there. Cannabis, go ahead and check out Cannabis Saves Lives just so you can see the old version, because here in probably the next few days, a week or less, we'll have a brand new version of that website. all the same information. We're still the same people. We still have the same mission, the same address, the same way to sign up for email address. You can sign up for email updates. So you can still sign up for email updates at Cannabis Saves Lives. That is the one thing that you can't do at Cannabis Patient Voice. Follow us on Twitter. We post news stories that are specific to the medical cannabis community at Pam for Compassion. So we'd love to hear from you there. Our next shows. So this was an introduction, way longer than probably shows in the future. I don't know. I don't know if we'll end up having a 2-hour program. There's enough going on out there that we certainly can. But I'm real delighted to provide you with this history and background about the Patient Advocacy Network. And we just barely touched on the work that we've done. I hope it gives you an idea, and you can kind of envision what all we've been doing since our inception in 2006. But again, we had already been in the trenches and doing this work for years prior to that. And we're not done. We don't feel done. There isn't anything about how the rules have come down in Washington or Oregon or any of the other states, and certainly not the implementation of Prop 64 that makes me happy as a patient advocate. And I want to fight for you. I want to fight alongside with you. So I hope that you can be generous and make a donation. Follow us on social media and tune in every Friday at 4:20 Pacific time. I will have a new episode of the Compassion Flower Report up for you. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you are someone who would like to be interviewed on the show, I would love to have you. This is all about the cannabis patient voice. We want to hear your voice. So I thank you for tuning in. I look forward to hearing your questions. I look forward to you getting involved, because I really look forward to training and educating patients about how to take on this issue and getting patients to the Capitol and start fixing these laws. And I look forward to working with all you patient advocates around the country who are grappling with how to reform the laws where you are, so that you have laws that are better for the patients. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Degé Coutee. I'm the president of Patient Advocacy Network at CannabisSavesLives.org, and this is the Compassion Flower Report.